Welcome in everyone to another episode of Zoom Action KSR's basketball breakdown show. We've got a fun one in store today. Defense focused. Kentucky is now I think they're 56 right. Ken Palm defense. They were like 112 literally 4 or 5 weeks ago. So there's been a massive improvement on that end of the floor. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. So a couple days before the SEC tournament. Kentucky's coming off that huge regular season finale win over Missouri where I was there with Jack Clearman and Stephen Peake, saw an awesome first half defensive performance from UK. And that's kind of where we're going to contrast what we saw in that Missouri game to kind of some not as exciting and thrilling defensive clips from the first. We're even going back to the Ohio State game. We got clips from Ohio State game, the Ole Miss blowout loss, and the Georgia loss as well on the road. So
Mhm.
we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to bring up the first clip here. And Brandon, I know Steven, or no, you sent in our group checks today kind of like a long list of all the areas that Kentucky has improved upon over the last 9 games in terms of like 3-point rate, all these different things. I'll tell Steven to throw that graphic on the screen or just a picture of that screenshot somewhere on the screen so people can kind of get an understanding of just how significant the improvements have been. And there's a bunch of different reasons why that we think that those improvements have happened, and that's what we're going to sit here and talk about today. So Brandon, I'm gonna let you run through this first clip here. This is from the Ole Miss loss where Kentucky just got absolutely blitzed from pretty much start to finish in this game. The defense was maybe the worst it had been all season, and this was the final game before Kentucky really started to turn the corner on that end. But we're just going to start with a simple out of bounds play here, and then we're going to dive into two Missouri clips that kind of show just a massive difference in effort, communication, chemistry, just defensive scheme that has allowed Kentucky to really uh, up themselves on that end of the floor. Because what is it, Brandon? Like they're 16th in adjusted defensive rating over the last 9 games, something around there, maybe
They
14th,
are 15th.
15th. So right in the middle there. So obviously that is a huge improvement, and the offense is still playing great. So Kentucky is doing or playing their best basketball at the right time. But Brandon, go ahead and run us through this first clip here. This is like I said from that Ole Miss game. Just some bad defense here. Some not maybe not the level of communication you want, but you run us through this play here and tell us what you saw and what really peeved you off because I know there's a lot you have to say, I'm sure, about it.
Yeah, I think that this clip it's just an encapsulation of some things that you saw throughout a lot of those first 9 SEC games, and even going back to some of the losses, certainly in non-conference play as well, where Kentucky just really struggled off the ball defensively. Their awareness wasn't very good. Their concentration wasn't very good. They would get stuck kind of too far off of shooters at different times. And here, Otega Owe is guarding Matthew Morrell, who's a very good shooter
Hmm.
for Ole Miss. So, I mean, like, first of all, especially Obi under, like, I would already be up in his jersey. There's no reason to be giving this much space against a shooter like that. And then here, there's a couple of things that happen. First off,
Just run straight into the
yeah,
screen.
it's like he goes out of his way to run into the screen. Like he obviously sees Morrell cutting this way, and he's already, in my opinion, too far off of him.
Hmm.
But then he goes out of his way just to run directly into the screen, kind of for it seems like no reason. And then he's stuck in a tough closeout situation. He's trying to get out there, flies by him. Like there's nothing he can do at that point. The hay's
Hmm.
already in the barn. He's already screwed this one up. And Morrell, gets an open step back three. And I think that something that we started to talk a lot about as Kentucky made this transition from, quite frankly, being bad defensively to being pretty darn good defensively was the number of uncontested threes that Kentucky was giving up
Absolutely.
compared to what they are now. Like those splits and those percentages that you can find on Synergy are night and day different. And this is essentially an uncontested three because Owe got himself running into that screen. And obviously, this is just one clip. I could find 5 clips like this from probably 6 or 7 different games over the course of the season. This was just an easy one to find from the Ole Miss game. But
Mhm.
then now we're going to juxtapose that against not just Otega Owe, but Colin Chandler also in some recent games fighting over some screens. And if you think back, we're not going to show these clips, but think back to the Tennessee games with how those guys were chasing around Chaz Lanier and what a
Yes.
good job they did against those guys. And then we're going to show some clips here from the Missouri game. But just that awareness off the ball has really improved, I feel like, in this second half of SEC play.
Well, and stick with this clip for just one more second with me. Go back to Brandon Garrison. Is there any is this a situation where maybe he should fly out a little bit more and maybe give him more of a contest, or is he doing what he should do and kind of sticking with his guy? Or is it just kind of maybe a lack of communication between him and Owe of, hey, jump out to this shooter?
Yeah, I think that to the communication standpoint, yes. What once you run into this screen, then you probably should see if you can kind of push Brandon Garrison out there and at least kind of use his length to maybe bother that more. Like in the moment, Brandon Garrison's probably not assuming that Ortega always
Hmm.
going to just run right into this screen. So I don't
Right.
necessarily expect him to read it super quickly and jump out there. Though it would be great if he did. But yeah, to me, this is more on yes, if Ortega's not going to do a better job of chasing Morrell and staying on his hip and being tight, then once he runs into the screen, he needs to say, "Oh crap, hey Brandon, go cover my butt and get out there to try to take this away."
Yeah, and I made that point just because I think in at least one of these next two Missouri clips we're going to show, you see not, I don't think it's Brandon Garrison, but I believe Andrew Carr. You see him just flying around, showing more on defense in terms
Mhm.
of like stunting, just making small moves, just to make life a little bit more difficult and close some gaps a little bit easier.
There's
But if you want to
more activity
more
overall.
activity, and that's kind of a basis of a lot of what we because Brandon and I were talking off air of like is there one main thing that you can kind of pinpoint to how this is all kind of come together, but it's a little thing. So Brandon, you can jump on over to that first Missouri clip here. One of your biggest discrepancies from like those first nine SEC games to the second set of SEC games, that second 9 game stretch was Kentucky's allowing 10% fewer 3 pointers per game, which we kind of did in our head. We're like, all right, that's an extra six. If teams are shooting 30 a game, that's an extra six or so shots from deep that Kentucky's not allowing anymore. You can, let's say they make two of those, that's 6 points per game right there that Kentucky's just not giving up anymore because of how they're kind of the general rule of thumb that we're talking here. So keep that whenever we're talking about like the first 9 games versus the last 9 games, know that we're talking about the first 9 SEC games versus the last 9 SEC games, and that's really where the corner hit. But Brandon, run us through this play here against Missouri and tell us what you loved about this defensive set from Kentucky.
I did love this one because man, when you look back
A
and
lot
if
of
you need to
action.
do it as you're watching this on YouTube, like now once you watch this, go back and watch that Ole Miss clip again because watch Otega Oweh fighting on Caleb Grill, number 31 from
Hmm.
Missouri. Again, one of the best 3 point shooters in the SEC. Watch him fighting through these screens as opposed to running into them. Watch him
Yeah.
fighting through these screens compared to what he was doing before. So here he gets over that flare pretty darn well. And to Zach's point from the previous clip, like you have a lot more help here from Andrew Carr than you had from Brandon
Hmm.
Garrison in that first clip. Now it's a little bit easier here because he's out on the perimeter and Gray's a non-shooter, but you see Andrew Carr helping to kind of cover up Oweh as he fights over. But it was still pretty darn good urgency here from Otega Oweh fighting over the top of this screen, which you want to do, and then he stays right with them and just busts right through that one. And
Hmm.
that's the really exciting part here is this right here where he gets himself skinny and just simply does not allow himself to get screened and kind of beats Grill to the spot there and to change directions like that is pretty impressive. And then you have a situation where they're trying to throw kind of a lob to a guy that, you know, Josh Gray's a
260
fine,
pounds.
yeah, I mean, he's a fine player, but like he doesn't even want that pass. Like he
Yeah.
knows he's going to look silly when they throw him that, and sure enough, it leads to a turnover. But that turnover was created by the urgency right here by Otega Oweh.
Yeah, and you've seen this a lot from Owen. And Colin Chandler did a great job on Grill as well. I believe he went 2 for 6 in that game, and
Yeah,
that's a win every single time. I know one of those shots was really tough. I believe he hit it over Owe. It was like right in his grill, nothing he could kind of do about it. But yes, just so much more effort you can tell. Kind of to your point, where in the Missouri or the Ole Miss clip, where Owe was already kind of backed off Morrell before the play even started. Like Owe is in Jacob Grill's grill for literally the entire possession here. And I really liked what you saw from Andrew Carr. And I think a lot of that as well with Andrew is just his back feels a lot better. Like I don't think he could move around as well as he does in this clip 3 or 4 weeks ago. And Pope even said that in the press conference. He touched Andrew Carr and was like, if we did that, he'd be on the injury report for 2 weeks. And I honestly believe him because it didn't feel like that guy had he was 25% of his former self for a long stretch of time. And he's clearly close to back to 100%. So I really liked what we saw from Andrew Carr's just overall movement and willingness to kind of play multiple guys or be a defender on two guys at the same time and just really help and recover. So I think just being healthy is probably a big factor. But now we'll go back to early in this Missouri game. We're going to stick with kind of the same general defensive theme that we've been talking about, with just better better chemistry, better ball screen coverage, and things like that. So Brandon, go ahead and dive us into this one and tell us what you see.
Yeah, I wanted to show this one just because it was important to give Otega Owe his flowers for his improvement from that Ole Miss clip to the Missouri clip. But Colin Chandler is probably the best on the team right
He's
now at
so
chasing
good.
shooters around. He's just
Hmm.
been incredible in this role. He did it against Chaz Lanier, did it in a couple other games and some spot minutes. Then he stepped up and played, I believe, like 16 to 17 minutes in this Missouri
16.
game,
Hmm.
and was a really big part of taking away Caleb Grill. And I want you to watch the urgency with which he chases him. Like I talk about it a lot in the KSR Skyline reports and stuff like that. Like there's nothing wrong with being a little bit scared of giving up threes to these big time shooters. And especially
Yeah.
when you're a freshman trying to earn some minutes, like, I don't want Colin Chandler to play scared in the sense that he's tentative, but I want him to be scared a little bit of giving up a three to Caleb Grill. And I think that
Yeah.
he's really taken some ownership of that defensively. And just watch how hard he's playing. I mean, he's sprinting, he's getting himself down and low, and then he contests the step back. I mean, he looks like a cyclist or something coming off of this screen where he's really contorting his body to not get screened and take that away. Stays with him, contests the step back. Brandon Garrison rebounds it. That is what it takes to take away threes from these high level shooters. And I always differentiate the word like effort from urgency a little bit. Maybe it's me being soft and not want to call people's effort out. But at no point in this season do I think that Kentucky just actively like wasn't playing hard. I don't really think that was a big issue, but I do think
Hmm.
that there's kind of a renewed urgency to like, oh shoot, this is what it takes to take some of these guys away. And heck, some of that is transitioning to Southeastern Conference play and the best Southeastern Conference basketball that it's ever been. I mean, a lot of these guys weren't playing at this level last year. They didn't
Right.
have to play as hard. Again, not saying that they didn't play hard, but you have to play at a different level in the SEC than you did at Drexel or that you did even at San Diego State or that you did at Fairleigh Dickinson or that you did at Dayton. It's different this season. It just means more, Zach, in the SEC. And these guys, I think, are really starting to realize, like, oh, shoot, this is the level that it requires in order to be good defensively in this league.
Yeah, I liked what you said about Owe in the last clip about him being skinny to get around those screens. And Colin Chandler does it twice in this clip where he
Yeah.
has to run around multiple defenders to get it. And I've noticed that Chandler, and I really hope he doesn't prove me wrong in the SEC tournament, but I feel like he's very good at not biting on pump fakes either. He's very good at knowing when guys are actually going to go for the shot. So he doesn't do a lot of, and part of that is being 6'6" and long. So it's not like he's Travis Perry having to defend these threes, like he's gonna if he just puts his arm up and puts it straight up, he's gonna be able to get a good contest. I believe he even blocked one of Jacob Grill's threes on
He
one of
did.
his like catches around a ball screen earlier in this game as well. So just really, really good effort from him. And man, it really makes you think that Colin Chandler's going to be a legitimate piece to this rotation, like if not the sixth man on this roster, kind of going forward. So great stuff from him, Brandon. Unless you've got anything else, we can go ahead and jump into our second segment here if you want.
Let's do it. Yeah, so this is kind of going back to Kentucky's ball screen defensive issues from early in the season. It was a big part of certainly the 20-point loss to Ohio State when Bruce
Mhm.
Thornton and Junie Mosley and those guys were just dominating the Cats in ball screen situations, and we saw some of that with Georgia's guards even as well in Athens. And I want everybody to remember like where Kobe Brea is standing in this clip. You can see how hugged up he is in the corner here, standing right next to his guy, which it isn't
Good
always the
shooter.
worst
LeFou
thing.
is a good shooter too.
Yeah, he's a good shooter. I want him over there trying to take that away a little bit. But again, once we get to the next clip, you'll really see the juxtaposition of kind of team defensive principles and being in position to take some stuff away. So Kentucky's playing their drop coverage here like they normally do. Jackson Robinson's fighting over the top. Brandon Garrison's there to kind of try to level off the ball as Jackson starts to fight back over. But again, you see where Kobe is. He's still pretty tight over there as he finally starts to stunt in there, Like the guy on the roll's already past him. He was
Hmm.
he just had too much ground to cover in order to get in there. He makes a little bit of an effort at it, but he's kind of just stuck in no man's land. That's something that Zach and I were talking about a lot before we started recording, was that Kentucky's guys just early in the season got caught in no man's land so much. Like at this point, he's obviously not taking away the three anymore, but he's also not
Not
really
defending
tagging
the
on the
ball.
goal and doing anything in that position. So he gets stuck in between, and it leads to a wide open layup. And again, I'll go back one more time. Oop, too far. Look at where Brea's feet are right here on the screen. Actually, I'm just going to.
Well, if you can actually
Yeah,
pause it
leave that
right when
mark there.
blue
We're going to see.
when yeah, it looks nice there. When Blue Kane actually makes this pass, I think that's also important where Kobe is compared to the next clip we're going to show.
Yeah, I like that. So
So
yeah,
he's probably what, 3 feet off the paint at that point, you'd say.
right.
And I think if we asked Kobe about this play, I think he would admit that this was kind of a half-assed attempt at kind of trying to play both and both ways here, like trying to defend
Right,
the
right.
three with also playing the paint. I think he would kind of say, I didn't really do that right. And Kobe's been very open over the last 5, 6, 7 games about Mark Pope kind of challenging him on defense, and he basically said, "Look, you're right. I've kind of been not being as good as I know I can be on that end. I wouldn't say effort in general is the issue there, but he's really kind of taken that to heart, and it's shown in a lot of these games. A quick stat I want to throw in here on Kobe real quick before we go. Um, the first 9 SEC games, he was averaging zero point 0.4 steals per game. He's got that up to 1.1. He's averaging a steal per game over Kentucky's last 9. Not a huge difference, but that generates an extra, you can look at an extra point or two per game just by Kobe being a little bit more
Love it.
focused on defense and playing passing lanes. So now we're into the Missouri game here, and whenever we get into, and I'll set the stage here for you, Brandon. Kobe again in the same corner here. You're going to get a pick and roll action at the top. I would like to note that Kobe's actually guarding a better 3-point shooter here. He's guarding Tamar Bates, who's like almost a 40% guy on the season. I believe the last guy, LaFew for Georgia, was like in the mid 30s. So arguably a better 3-point shooter here. And he notices his mistakes from that Georgia game, and he sneaks in as the ball screen is kind of happening. That's where he starts to shrink in and get inside the paint a little bit, and you can tell when the pass is made. Not right here, but on this the ball screen pass from the point guard here. Or no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at I'm thinking of the wrong thing. But yeah, so as this initial pass goes in on the cut here, you can see where Kobe is already a lot closer to, probably, I think he even gets closer as the ball is about to get passed into the paint, maybe like a foot outside of the. So
Mhm.
he's already inching in. He's already setting himself up in position here, and he's leaving a better 3-point shooter open. And I think that's a lot of that is, just being more willing to jet yourself out there and knowing that you can help and recover, maybe just a little bit more defensive confidence in himself. But Brandon, before I continue to ramble on, what did you like about this play from Kobe other than kind of what I've already said?
Yeah, so first off, I do want to showcase Otega Owe again. It is another great example of getting skinny, as Zach and I have talked about, to fight through this screen here. Like he just closes all of that space between him and Grill to not let him come off of that screen cleanly. And I think that earlier in the season, he would have been, like back here and been in a
Hmm.
lot worse position to come off. And he just fights right through that, sort of blows this play up from the beginning. But yeah, the Georgia clip was a ball screen. This is kind of a two-man action off of the ball, so it's a little bit different. But the positioning and the responsibility of Kobe Brea is the same thing. And I said, remember where Kobe Brea was standing in that last clip? It was kind of right there, or
Yeah.
so. Well, now he's already a full step or two closer to the paint, closer to the midline that we talk about a lot. And when you're off the ball, getting kind of jumped in towards that midline, where now when he makes the same kind of aggressive play that he made against Georgia, he's just actually able to do something to impact the play as opposed to it being too late. Like he tried to make a play in that Georgia game. He was just coming from here instead of coming from here, so he couldn't actually get into a position to make anything happen. And just that little, sticking his off arm in there made the
Hmm.
catch hard. Now you have 3 blue jerseys. Like credit to Amari Williams for cracking down in there as well and being there to protect the rim. He gets a hand on it, and now you get a steal for Kentucky. So, as I mentioned, and I wrote about it in my Watch the Tape article on KSR after the game about, is it the right decision for Kobe Brea to leave a 42% three-point shooter in the corner? Like, I don't know if it's the right decision or not, but honestly, it becomes irrelevant when you make those decisions with some real decisiveness, and I'll use the word
Hmm.
again, urgency. And I I always kind of use the quip. My dad used to always say this to me, and like when I was playing tennis and stuff, but he would always say often wrong but never in doubt. And
Yeah.
like it's okay to make some quote unquote wrong decisions. Those things happen over the course of a 70 to 75 possession college basketball game. But what's not okay is to get yourself stuck in no man's land, like we talked about in that Georgia clip, where you're not really taking away the three, but you're also not really tagging on the roll or tagging on the back screen or helping towards the midline. Here you see like, okay, whichever decision he made would have been fine, but just make the freaking decision and be decisive in that, where you actually then impact the game defensively. And I think that's where you've seen Kentucky grow more than anywhere else. And then especially specifically and individually, Kobe Brea in that improvement as well.
And the term you used in our group text was Kentucky is shrinking the floor more. So I kind of got a question for you. How how is Kentucky being able to, in theory, shrink the floor by, attack, closing out faster, closing out quicker, bringing slides over faster? How are they able to do that while also allowing 10% fewer three pointers per game? How do you think that that is kind of playing out and actually working in Kentucky's favor? Is it
Yeah,
just kind of so much of an effort and chemistry thing? Like, all right, we're an effort's probably not the right word to use. I hope people aren't actually like, I know these guys are all giving effort. I hope that's not how I'm coming across. Um, but is it just a matter of they're more confident in themselves? Maybe that's the word I need to use. They're more confident in themselves to be able to recover maybe more than they were at the beginning of the season. You think that how those two things kind of actually work together?
yeah. I think that there's two reasons why Kentucky has been able to see that opponent 3-point rate go from 54.1% or 51.4%, excuse me, in the first 9 games to 41% in these last 9 games. And I told Zach that 51.4%, that was the fifth highest in the country. Like
Yeah.
Kentucky was giving up threes at a historic rate. And what 51.4% means, it quite literally means that the opponent was taking 51.4% of their field goals from beyond the arc. And part of that,
That's what Pope's offense did at BYU
yes,
last season.
right, exactly. And part of that was Kentucky was in that kind of in that thought process of letting some guys shoot. And quite frankly, we got burned on it a couple times. Like it was a
Hmm.
big part of losing to Vanderbilt, where they tried to play the percentages and it just didn't work out. So I think Kentucky kind of went away from quote unquote letting and almost actually wanting some guys to shoot some threes. And then also, yes, I think that a lot of it is, and some of it makes sense. You have a brand new coach with 12 players that he's never coached. I guess he coached
Hmm.
Jackson Robinson. He coached one of the 12 players, and none
Not
of the
against Missouri.
yeah, and none of the 12 players had ever played together. So you're learning how to communicate with one another. You're learning how to read one another. You're learning how to play off of one another. Just like that, from early in the season, Kentucky got a lot of accolades for how they were able to coexist offensively and how well they read and reacted with themselves in this very intricate offense offensively. Well, read and react and all that kind of stuff, it translates to the defensive end of the floor too. It just takes a lot longer to do it because you can't dictate what's happening. Like you're having to read and react to the other team, as opposed to offensively, you can kind of dictate more of what you want to do. So I think that through the first 9 SEC games and therefore the first 20 or whatever games overall, you just saw Kentucky kind of learning themselves, learning each other, learning their coach. The coach was learning them, and then
Hmm.
over these last 9 games, you've seen them be able to reap some benefits of it being March 11th now instead of January 11th, and these guys just know each other at a lot higher level. And that yes, you're able to shrink the floor more, but then fly around a lot more efficiently than you were early in the season.
And I think the injuries, I mean, we haven't really mentioned it yet, but that's you think that that has to be part of it as well. Like, and I know even over the last 9 games, they've still had to kind of deal with getting Lamont back in, but over the last 3 games, Pope's really got his team. Like he knows this is his team now. Like we've talked about with Andrew Carr, he's just looking a lot better and healthier. Lamont Butler continues to look better and healthier each game. His point of attack defense, you can tell, is just makes life a little bit easier, at least early on in possession. You've got Colin Chandler, who's really coming to his own as a defender. Amari Williams has finally figured out how big he is, and even though he's not, racking up all these blocks and everything, a lot of guys still don't want to go in and attack on him. So let's go ahead and dive into our last segment here. We're going back to the Ohio State game, and this is actually going to be an Aaron Bradshaw bucket. So we're kind of bringing up some old nightmares. But the contrast to the Missouri game and how Kentucky actually was able to fix it was very cool. Um, and I think what you'll know, one of my big takeaways before you dive into this play, Brandon, is that you're going to notice where Andrew, and like how I kind of bragged on Andrew Carr being able to fly around a little bit more in that Missouri game because of, whether it's being healthy or whatnot, or just being more in tune with the defense. He obviously just looked a lot better on that end. In this play, you're going to see against Ohio State where he sticks with a 29% 3-point shooter the entire time for, reasons that I'm sure you can probably better describe than myself. But you go ahead and take us in, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about, the viewers, whenever you see Andrew Carr here. But Brandon, go ahead and take us into this play and what you saw.
Yeah, so there's a handful of different breakdowns in this clip. I think I went back and pulled it from my post game kind of Twitter thread breakdown, and I think I either referred to it as a comedy of errors or something like that. But there's a lot going on here. First off, this was a common issue early in the season, especially when Kentucky would struggle against some of these really good ball screening teams where they just wouldn't get the ball screen communicated properly. Kentucky wants to weak a lot of these ball screens, meaning that
Hmm.
Lamont Butler wants to force Bruce Thornton to his offhand, his weak hand, in this instance, his left hand. So he kind of, as Andrew Carr starts to come up here, then that's great. That's going to then force Bruce Thornton off this way. Well, at the last second, Aaron Bradshaw twists it, and Amari Williams just kind of is out of position. So you see that Amari
Yeah.
Williams is in position for Thornton to come off to his left, but because Amari or Aaron Bradshaw twists it, now he's just on the wrong side of the ball screen, quite frankly. So
Mm.
that's issue number one. And then, as Zack mentioned, you have Devin Royal over here, who's not really a shooting threat for Ohio State, and Andrew Carr is tightening up to him as the ball gets driven in a straight line to the rim. Like this is a perfect example of one. He probably should like already have a foot in the paint at all
Yeah.
times anyway, just so Bruce Thornton can't see that driving lane as clearly. But then certainly as he starts to get downhill, like he needs to have 2 feet at the midline right here, thinking about taking a charge, thinking about protecting the rim, and kind of daring them to say, okay, fine, kick it out to Devin Royal and let's see what happens. But then we have a kind of the same issue on the backside here. We just mentioned some of those aggressive plays that Kobe Bray was making early in the season, or not early in the season, but against Missouri. Well, now look at where Otega Owe is standing, and he's kind of just observing this play as it happens. And Aaron Bradshaw's rolling down here, and Otega just kind of watches it happen. And sure, he's guarding a guy that can shoot a little bit, but we just talked about like, sometimes you have to make an aggressive play. And is it the right one? I don't know. Maybe not. But just kind of standing there watching isn't the right play. I can guarantee you that. And if he would have cracked down in the same way that Andrew Carr could have cracked down, if he's in here taking that pass away, you probably get a steal or you get a deflection at least. It disrupts Aaron Bradshaw's timing a little bit more, and you keep him from putting it in the bucket. And that's what we're talking about, shrinking the floor, where Andrew Carr needed to be in here, Otega
Hmm.
Owe needed to be in here, and you see that a lot more over these last few games from Kentucky, and it just wasn't the case early in the season. That's why opponents were shooting 58.3% from two, because they were just able to get to the rim without a whole lot of interruption.
Yeah, and it's going back to the initial ball screen defense. Like Amari is just kind of, like I said, the lack of communication from whoever it ends up being. Like he just puts himself into a backpedal situation the moment that this, because I mean, it looks funny when you look at when you pause it right there because it's like, what is he kind of looking at type thing. But he just is in a terrible position. And then you'll see kind of in the next Missouri clip where that's not as big of an issue. I don't know if it's Amari on the ball screen defense in the next clip, but it's kind of a similar situation where you see the big just play better and just kind of know ahead of time where to be and put himself in a better position. And with Andrew Carr on that play, like that wasn't even before that wasn't during his injury. Like he said he
Right.
got hurt around the Brown game. Ohio State game was 10 days before that. So that wasn't an issue of him like just not having the body strength to get over there. That was just kind of what they didn't do. So we'll contrast that with this great play here, where you'll see Andrew Carr. I believe he actually gets himself in the corner again here, and you'll see him not stick around. He does a little bit more flying around. But Brandon, go ahead and take us into this play. And it looks like we do have Brandon Garrison out there
Yeah.
instead of Amari end up being the guy. So take us through this play and what'd you see? What'd you like?
Yep. So first off, it's great. Obviously, Lamont Butler played in that Ohio State game too, but it's sure nice having him back because of this type of ball pressure that he's able to provide away from the basket. We talked about Otega Oweh getting skinny and fighting through screens earlier in this show. Lamont Butler does the same thing in ball screen situations up here, fighting over on number one Warwick, and then from the beginning here, you just see some better help, some better activity, some better moving around by Kentucky. Like Brandon Garrison got himself over there just in case
Yes.
Warwick would have been able to turn the corner and go left. He was there. Lamont Butler gets back. So now we're into ball screen number two. Butler runs into this one a little bit more. And what do? They just kind of instinctively switch it. Brandon Garrison stays with Warwick. Butler, once he gets hung up, he's back on Gray. But then also look at Andrew Carr. That's
Hmm.
the,
He's
that's the
leaving a
exact
good shooter as
position.
well.
Yeah, that's the exact position that Otega Oweh was in that Ohio State clip, essentially, where he's coming down off of a really good shooter in Jacob Cruz. He came down there to take away the layup. And hey, like, let's see if Warwick can throw this drift pass over there. And not to mention, Colin Chandler's doing a good job of kind of shrinking the floor a little bit there and getting himself facing the ball where he's playing two guys. So he's ready to go close out to Cruz or close out to Grill. You have
Hmm.
Oweh up here choking the ball a little bit, not making it easy to get that one pass away thrown here to Tony Perkins as he circles up, and he does a good enough job that he kind of gets him off balance, then is able to back pick it and go for a pick six on the other end. So everything about this play, again, it's urgency, it's being aggressive, it's not being afraid to make a mistake, it's shrinking the floor, and it's just this overall five-man positioning. Everything from the switch between Brandon Garrison and Lamont Butler to Andrew Carr cracking down to the way that Colin Chandler's playing two over there, two Oweh's aggressiveness on the one pass away guy. Like all five players in this clip played a role in getting the stop and creating the turnover. And there just weren't a whole lot of possessions early in the season where it felt like all five guys were pulling in the same direction. You always think about when you're playing fourth grade basketball or whatever, and your coach always talks about kind of like moving like you're connected on a string or whatever. That was never the case with
Hmm.
Kentucky early on, and it's been much more the case for Kentucky here, where it's a cohesive five-man defensive unit, and that's how you go. I mean, this is how telling it is. Zack mentioned earlier how via KenPom they've improved from 112th to 55th on a season-wide basis in terms of defensive efficiency from the Ole Miss game to now. In the first 9 games, this is from Bart Torvik. In the first 9 SEC games, Kentucky was 199th in adjusted defensive efficiency. 199th. There's 364 Division One college basketball teams.
Yeah.
Since then, these last 9 games, so same sample size, they're 15th. Like that is it's honestly amazing. Like I would have never dreamt that they would improve this much. Did I think they could improve? Obviously, I thought they maybe could go from 199th to 100th or something like
Yeah.
that. I did not see them going from 199th to 15th. That everybody in the building deserves credit for that.
That ended up being a 9 points per game difference as
Yeah.
well. 9 points per game, whereas Kentucky's offense, I think, actually it went down. It dipped 1 point per game.
Mm-hmm.
So you're winning your games now by 8 points when initially they were losing them by 2 points in those first 9 SEC games. So it really has just been kind of. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I don't know if you really know like what the exact areas are of where they've like pushed these buttons correctly. But like even on this play right here, like Brandon Garrison, I thought Lamont Butler did a better job compared to the Ohio State game of maybe pushing his the ball handler out a little bit farther, and that helped Brandon Garrison just get a little bit more of a runway to where he has a little bit more room for, I guess, error in that sense compared to Amari, where he has more space to recover. And I also think Brandon is just a pretty good perimeter defender for a big, maybe
Yeah.
probably a little bit better than Amari. And if we're being honest, Brandon Garrison did a lot of things in this game that maybe want to tear my hair out. But you see stuff like this, and you're like, okay, like these are things that don't show up on the stat sheet where
Right.
he was a part of this play. He was one of the reasons that Kentucky was able to end up with this steal and break away on the other end. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and just kind of wrap up here, Brandon. Unless you have any final thoughts on what we just talked about there.
No, I don't. It's been fun to watch the improvements, and
Yeah.
it's a big reason why they went 4-5 in the first nine. They went 6-3 in the second nine. So
Hmm.
it's also it's a good time of year to make some improvements because
It really
now
is.
you either lose or you either win or you go home. So
Well, so I'll leave you with this. I'm going to ask you a very massively loaded question
okay,
and answer it to the best of your abilities. In three, give me 3 points, three major points as to why Kentucky's defense has significantly improved.
okay. I'm going to go with getting a little bit, and it truly is a little bit because there's still been some issues here, but getting a little bit of roster continuity
Hmm.
where you at least know on a game to game basis who's going to play. And I forget who I was talking to about it. I think I was talking to good old Alan Cutler about it actually, but
Shout
that
out our guy.
that you know let's not get it twisted. We all wish that Jackson Robinson was playing. That
Hmm.
period, point blank. Make sure you hear me say that. But if he's not going to play, I think it's good that he's ruled out for the season because you don't have to worry about like,
Give
well,
him to Colin
yeah,
Chandler. Here you go.
yeah. Like so, Colin Chandler's not always looking over his shoulder, saying, well, like, am I going to play 2 minutes today? Am I going to play 20 minutes today? Am I not in the rotation? Am I in the rotation? Are we preparing for life with or without Jackson Robinson? It allows him to just be in there. And same thing, even to some extent, with Trent Noah's minutes or Travis Perry's minutes. Like those guys know they're playing. And now you have a healthy Andrew Carr, as Zach moves his cat or dog or whatever that was.
Yeah, that's
Um,
my cat. She
yeah,
has to say hi.
you have you have Lamont Butler who's back and getting healthy. So I think that
Hmm.
being able to settle in and know what you're coaching and know who your teammates are going to be and know what your role is going to be is important. Secondly, the aggressiveness and the willingness to make some mistakes. I think that
Hmm.
has been a game changer because Kentucky went from forcing a 10.7% turnover rate, which was one of the lowest in all of
Bad.
college basketball.
All on steals too, pretty much.
Yeah, to 16.2% in these last 9 games, which still isn't great, but it's a heck of a lot better than 10.7%. And when you're able to force some of those turnovers, you're just taking points off the board, not to mention giving yourself a couple of easy ones. And I think that the increase in turnovers and the aggressiveness that came with that, it's the same thing that's led to them taking away some more threes. It's the same thing that's led to them doing a better job protecting the paint because they're aggressive and they're making decisive, urgent decisions to not always kind of looking over their shoulder of like, well, I'm trying to think through from walk through, like, did Coach Pope say I'm supposed to help off a number 25 or am I not supposed to help? It's like, screw all that. Just go do something really hard and it'll probably be okay. And then lastly, I think that you are starting to see this team figure out to some extent how to play without fouling so much. The
Hmm.
the opponent free throw rate has gone down a significant margin. And not only does that keep the opponent from shooting some, high percentage, easy, unguarded shots and giving them kind of free points, but it also keeps your better players on the floor a lot more. Like
Hmm.
you're not seeing some of these guys rack up 2-3 fouls in the first half and where you only get to play Amari Williams 19 minutes in a game, or you only get to play Lamont Butler 19 minutes in a game, or whatever it may be. And that they're certainly still not perfect in that area, but again, it's an improvement, and that's what you want
Yeah.
to see in the back half of this season. So I think that, yeah, but between just kind of knowing who's going to be in the games, between playing with some more urgency and aggressiveness and being decisive, and then also with not fouling so much, I think that you've seen this team go from legitimately one of the worst defenses in high major college basketball to being pretty darn good. And people always love to throw out these metrics that you have to be top 26 and this or that, or you have to be whatever going into March. Like, yeah, Kentucky's season long numbers may not reflect those, but guess what, folks? Over the last month, which is a real sample size, and we're playing really good teams, they're right there with them. Like, they're
Hmm.
in the top 20 offensively and defensively since February 8th. February 8th was over a month ago.
Over a
So,
month, yeah.
yeah, so like you're starting to have some reasons where it's like, hey, I know we don't have Jackson Robinson. I know we don't have Kirk Risa, but you know, why the heck can't we be a team that makes a run over the next couple of weeks? And I think that, down the stretch, you've seen a team that has played like a group that can do some things in March.
Yeah, well, before we wrap up here, I want to just focus on your first point there about kind of the roster continuity and everything, and just mention how it definitely seems like Pope is more comfortable and confident with the group that he has right now, just because he knows that, barring any weird injury, this is the group that he's going to have.
Yeah.
And you saw it really against the Missouri game. I think it was Andrew Carr. Andrew Carr had a season high in minutes. Kobe Brea, second most of the season. Amari Williams, third most of the season. Had Otega and Lamont not picked up some cheap fouls in the first half, they're probably going to inch close to that as well. And it was really in the second half, it was only kind of Colin Chandler and Brandon Garrison off the bench. He's really starting to tighten things down. Some of it is out of necessity because, like you said, you're down two major. And we'll just say one. I mean, Kerr hasn't played in 3 months. Like, how much is he
Sure.
even really part of the roster at this point? So, and for the final 5 minutes of that Missouri game, Pope didn't make one sub. He played the starters the whole way, and you can see guys like Kobe especially is really starting to get just more comfortable with his role. Like he's been starting a lot now, so Pope is still going to make his kind of early, first media timeout subs like he still did against Missouri. Like I think that's just going to be his thing. But I do think that his idea of letting guys kind of get a feel for the game early on, so that way, you can have Travis Noah or not Travis Noah, Travis Perry and Trent Noah both come in and hit big threes and kind of take a little bit of pressure off, and you can give Colin Chandler some run in the first half so he can be, ready for the second half as well. But then when the game gets tight and it's 5 minutes to go, play the guys you know. So I
Yep.
think he's definitely getting more comfortable with his rotation. I'm sure he's done that before in the season where he's gone the final 5 minutes with the same group of guys, but it definitely doesn't feel like it all that often. So I thought that was an interesting note, and it kind of goes back to what Brandon was saying with the continuity, and everyone's just learning each other better. When you're playing all those minutes, yes, you're gonna allow more room for fatigue, but I think you allow less room for error because everyone's kind of on the same page as opposed to just fluctuating guys in and out over the final 10 minutes of a game or whatever. So
Mhm.
that was my final point there. But Brandon, are you going to Nashville?
Actually, no. I am. I just decided I'm splitting the difference. I'm just going to Lexington, actually.
Okay,
So
halfway there.
I'm gonna watch some games at KS Bar. I'm gonna hang
Nice.
around Lexington, and then I've decided that if Kentucky makes it to Saturday, then I will go the rest of the way down. But
Sweet.
I can I can spend the time in Lexington for like a third of the price that I could spend it in Nashville. So we're just gonna have some fun there and see what happens.
Love it. Well, I leave tomorrow afternoon. I'm going down with Jack and Steven. We'll have Dr. Mike down there shooting pictures. Tyler will be there. Drew will be there. The whole KSR radio crew will be there. Gonna be a lot of fun. We're all really, really excited for it. So we're hoping to get, at least one tournament win would be nice. I really think Kentucky's going to be. I'm not necessarily concerned about Oklahoma or Georgia. It's that next game against Alabama that I think is really going to worry me a bit. But
Yeah.
still got to beat Oklahoma or Georgia. So I think Kentucky will do that. But this was fun. Maybe we'll try and do another one before maybe the NCAA tournament. We'll do some SEC tournament breakdown stuff on the next show. But other than that, guys, we will see you all next time.